I can't begin to tell you what a profound honor and even a comfort it is for me to be with all of you today. I know that so many of us would rather that there didn't have to be a day like this. And so the circumstances that bring us together are difficult, but I want you to know I am very thankful to be here with all of you. And I join with Pastor Cornell and his family and all of you just to express my gratitude for each person being here. And I know that there's a lot of the Romanian people here at this gathering today. And you know, I couldn't help as I heard the Romanian national anthem to sort of feel the spirit of the Romanian people. You've come through great heartache and struggle through totalitarianism, and you understand maybe better than any people the importance of freedom and the cause of freedom itself. And I am thankful that every one of you have come to America to make the cause of freedom in this country greater than it was before. I had the privilege about an hour ago of speaking to Marius Bodinariu on the phone. And he wanted me to tell you specifically how deeply he appreciates your prayers and your presence in this place. And he said to me that this battle is not over, and that he hopes that someday what we do here today and what challenge he's going through will help many other families and change the injustice that occurs in these situations. And I reminded him, you know, to take courage, that God has his children in his hands, and that to remember, if it hadn't been for Goliath, no one would have ever heard of King David. Now, I've had the privilege of being the head of what we call the governor's office for children here in this state. And I understand the challenges that are out there, but I also know that there is no better department of welfare, there's no better department of education, there's no better of drug abuse prevention, there's no better department of crime prevention, there's no better department of just general hope than this thing called family. And I am convinced that the safest and most wonderful place that God ever intended for children to be is in the bosom and safety of mom and dad and their siblings. It is what every child needs more than anything else. In the Congress, I have the privilege of chairing the Foster Youth Caucus and the Orphans and Vulnerable Children Caucus and the Adoption Caucus. And everything that I've ever learned tells me that in an ideal circumstance, in every way that we possibly can, if we strengthen the family, if we let families flourish, if we have policies that strengthen families and encourage them, then we do the best possible for the children that they love and nourish. Now, the reason I mention all of these things is because these issues that we face today are not just isolated. They deal with religious freedom, parental rights, and the survival of countries, the survival of the human family itself. And across cultures in almost every society in the world, humanity reflects two general consensus. And that is that the biological parents are the most sacred and inviolable people to trust with the care and upbringing of their children. And secondly, only when a parent violates that care and that sacred responsibility through abject abuse, neglect, or abandonment does the government ever have the legitimate responsibility to override those parental rights, and when they have to do so in the best interest of the children. But the power of the state to supersede and even terminate someone's parental rights is probably the most terrifying powers a government can ever have. And it's true that when it's used appropriately and in the right circumstances, it can be a vital necessity. But when it is abused, and it has been abused by Barnevernet in many, many instances, it is one of the most abhorrent and government authorities that we can imagine in a civilized world. When parents have their rights as parents unnecessarily trampled on and children are unjustly removed from their home and their family, the trauma to the parents and the children is horrifying. And often additional trauma follows all of that because of the additional foster care placements, the fear and uncertainty that come with those transitions, the separation from their siblings, and the other many emotionally crushing elements. And to needlessly inflict this kind of harm through government-sanctioned tyranny is an abject disgrace for a country like Norway, and it soils their claims to be one of the world's foremost countries in protecting human rights and children's rights. Now, unfortunately, the concerns over this case are vastly exacerbated by the track record of Norway's Child Protective Service Agency, known as Barnevernet. One Norwegian journalist's research of child removals in Norway led to the conclusion that a family of mixed ethnicity, I may say that again, a family of mixed ethnicity, as in the case of the Barnevernet family, is 4 times more likely to have their children removed than a native Norwegian family. And one report stated that fully 40% of children now under the care of Barnevernet have an immigrant background. And some of the casual Google searchings lead to a myriad of stories of foreign-born children who are removed for reasons that sound laughable on their face. Far too many of these cases have been tragically and repeatedly led to these children being permanently removed from their parents and their home. And to cite just 2 examples, in 2012, an Indian child was removed because he was alleged to routinely sleep in bed with his parents, and this was deemed inappropriate, despite the fact that co-sleeping is the normal practice in India. In 2014, a Russian child was removed because he was missing a tooth, and this raised suspicions of abuse within Barnevernet. I hope they don't come to my house. You know, my children have been missing a teeth a lot of times. This is a level of institutional bias and cultural prejudice that is baffling and maddening. And it's the innocent children of these families that pay the lifelong price for the failure of the very institution charged with protecting these innocent children that end up abusing them because of their bad policies. Now, the Barnevernet extended family have reported that the initial interviews with the Norwegian CPS were largely centered on concerns over the family's commitment to raising the children in a Christian context. And we have reports from the minutes of the Barnevernet meetings that state their concerns over the Barnevernet family, quote, their way of upbringing which is justified by the Bible, unquote. That's a big concern. The agency minutes of their own meeting are reported to reveal that the parents' Bible-based parenting style, and I quote, their Bible-based parenting style causes stress for the children. And there were concerns that the girls might have a, quote, inner conflict about not being good enough when it comes to their parents' values. Ladies and gentlemen, I have made international religious freedom a major priority my entire career in Congress. And I have to tell you that this case, at least on its face, appears to illustrate a state-sanctioned religious persecution on a level that is utterly mind-boggling. And this is coming from a developed country, ostensibly, and a respected member of NATO. Freedom of religion, which entails both the freedom of belief and of expression to conduct oneself and raise one's family according to those beliefs, is one of the very most fundamental human values of all. And without freedom to believe according to one's own conscience, all other freedoms eventually perish. And now Norway is not party not to one, but to multiple UN and European treaties that elevate these rights. And yet, tragically, the fact remains that this semi-private child protection agency called Barnevernet seems to routinely trample on the very rights Norway claims to champion. Now let me, if I could, just conclude with 3 points about the Barnevernet family's case. First, the Barnevernet family's case blatantly appears to be completely a disproportionate response on the part of a child welfare agency. Despite receiving the information leading to an investigation of the Barnevernet family in September, the children weren't even removed until November. And then for the 2 months that followed, the parents were not even allowed to see their children, even their 3-month-old nursing infant. Second, unlike our American system, I hope it stays that way, there appears to be little, if any, oversight by the Norwegian Child Protective Services by its judicial system. As long as it remains this way, Barnevernet will be free to ignore periodic worldwide cry like this one, caused by its actions, and it will continue with almost complete impunity to trample on the rights and lives of the very children they should be protecting. And third, despite their medical examinations, interviews, and investigations, all of them produced absolutely no evidence of abuse whatsoever. The agency is allegedly still pursuing the termination of parental rights in order to make the children eligible for adoption. This is an extreme, merciless, and punitive recourse, and I believe this will cause increasing outrage in the global community if they continue to pursue it. The posture of every child protection agency should be to reunify a child with their biological family as soon as expeditiously, as safely as possible. This means that the first response of an agency should look to provide whatever services are needed to the family to facilitate a child returning home as quickly, as safely possible. Only after all other avenues have been tried and exhausted should an agency ever consider taking the drastic action of terminating a parent's rights and tearing apart a family. So today I just want you to know that I join here with all of you in expressing a solidarity with Marius and Ruth Barnevernet, and calling upon the Norwegian government to accept responsibility for its actions and to return the Barnevernet children to their parents as quickly as possible. Furthermore, those of us who are leaders in Congress on child welfare issues and who work with the State Department on these issues in an international context, we would welcome the opportunity to have a dialogue with the Norwegian Barnevernet and their government about how to reform their system to prevent these tragic cases from needlessly happening to another family ever again. Now, I know that these things take time, and I know how heartbreaking it must be to the family. I can't imagine it. I have 7-year-old twins at home, and it makes me emotional just to thinking about somebody coming in and taking those little children out of the safety and love of their mother and I. So I just want to say a word of encouragement to the Barnevernet family and to all of you that have suffered in any way that breaks your soul about your children. And that is to remember that God in heaven that we serve, the Lord of the universe, hears the cries of absolutely every last one of His children, no matter who or where they are. And if time turns every star in heaven to ashes, I know in my soul, and so do you, that that eternal moment of His deliverance will finally come to each one of them. Let that encourage us, and yet let us be more dedicated than ever to being their voices on this earth, so that someday all of God's children, no matter who they are, might walk in the light of His salvation and hope, and might be able to see the light of freedom cast across their face, as it is to all of us today. God bless you all. Thank you for being here.